The year was 1986. The small town of Southington in Connecticut, USA, was known for its quiet green valleys. But beneath this calm exterior, a story was unfolding that still sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. This is the story of the Snedeker family, who came to this town hoping to escape their troubles and start anew. Little did they know that their dream would soon turn into a nightmare, one that would change their lives forever. The Snedekers were an ordinary family facing extraordinary hardships. Alan and Carmen Snedeker, along with their 4 children, Philip, Brad, Jennifer, and Melissa, were struggling to hold their lives together. Their financial situation was dire, and to make matters worse, their eldest son, 16-year-old Philip, had been diagnosed with cancer. His radiotherapy treatments required frequent hospital visits, draining the family's resources. When they found an old house in Southington at an unbelievably low rent, close to the hospital, it seemed like a blessing. But this bargain hid a truth so dark that it would haunt them for years to come. This is the story of a house that appeared to be a simple aging structure from the outside, but was filled with the stench of death and the screams of restless spirits within. It is the story of a darkness that plagued the Snedeker family, not only in the dead of night, but even in the light of day. This is the story of a funeral home whose shadow tore a family apart, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. When the Snedeker family arrived at the old house in Southington, they carried with them a flicker of hope for a fresh start. The house was large, 2-storied, built with wood and brick. From the outside, it looked slightly worn, but the rent was so low that the family overlooked its flaws. The house had several rooms, a spacious hall, a kitchen, and a basement. The basement door was old and heavy, and there was a peculiar smell, as if fresh air hadn't reached it in years. Carmen tried to lift her children's spirits. "Look, this is our new home. We're going to make a fresh start here, together." But the enthusiasm she hoped for was missing from her children's faces. Philip, in particular, who was already withdrawn due to his illness, took an immediate dislike to the house. Upon seeing the basement, he said, "Mom, this place doesn't feel right. Something's wrong here." Alan and Carmen dismissed it as their children's apprehension about a new place. They had no other choice. The proximity to the hospital and the affordable rent forced their hand. They unpacked their belongings, decorated the house, and began trying to rebuild their lives. But that sense of normalcy lasted only a few days. The first few days were uneventful. The children started school, Alan went to his odd jobs, and Carmen busied herself with managing the household. But the nights felt strange. The house was enveloped in a deep silence that didn't seem natural. At times, the children felt as though someone was standing outside their rooms. 10-year-old Jennifer told her mother one night, "Mom, there was someone standing outside my window. But when I looked, no one was there." Carmen brushed it off as her children's imagination. But soon, she began to feel uneasy herself. Dishes in the kitchen would clatter on their own. Strange noises came from the basement, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Even Alan, who was usually skeptical of such things, heard heavy footsteps climbing the stairs one night. When he checked, there was no one there. The basement was the greatest mystery for the Snedeker family. The air down there was cold and heavy. The walls were damp, and the floor bore old stains that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years. Philip chose to make the basement his bedroom, as he preferred solitude. But sleeping there, he began to experience strange things. One night, Philip woke his mother, his face pale and his eyes filled with fear. "Mom, there's someone in the basement. I feel like someone's watching me, someone who shouldn't be here." Carmen hugged him and said, "It's just your imagination, sweetheart. You're sick. You need rest." But the next day, when Carmen went to the basement to do laundry, she felt something off. She noticed old, rusted hooks embedded in the walls, as if they were used to hang something heavy. In one corner, she found an old coffin handle, half buried in the wall. She called Alan to see it. Laughing it off, he said, It's probably part of some old furniture. Old houses have weird stuff like this. But when they moved an old wardrobe in the basement, their blood ran cold. Behind it was a small room containing tools used for preparing dead bodies, knives, needles, and strange containers with dried-up liquid. The walls had deep red stains that looked like blood. Carmen's heart raced. She turned to Alan and said, "This isn't a normal house. We need to leave." Alan contacted the real estate agent, and the chilling truth came to light. The house had once been a funeral home where bodies were prepared for burial. The basement was where the corpses were kept. Hearing this, the Snedekers were horrified. But they didn't have the money to move out immediately. Out of necessity, they stayed in that house. After the basement's secret was revealed, strange occurrences in the house intensified. Screams echoed from the children's rooms at night. Jennifer said she dreamt of a man with no eyes. 13-year-old Brad reported feeling cold breaths under his bed. Philip, however, was the most affected. He grew increasingly quiet and withdrawn. His eyes held an eerie emptiness, as if his body was present, but his soul was elsewhere. One night, Carmen heard strange noises from the basement. She went down and found Philip standing in the dark, staring at the wall. "Phil, what are you doing here?" she asked. Without blinking, he replied, "They're calling me Mom. They want me to stay with them." His voice had an unnatural depth that didn't belong to him. Carmen forcibly dragged him upstairs, but the fear in his eyes haunted her. Objects in the house began moving on their own. Kitchen utensils fell, windows opened and closed without wind. One night, Melissa screamed for her mother. She said a woman with floor-length hair was standing in her room, muttering incoherently. When Carmen rushed in, there was no one there. Even Alan began to believe the house wasn't normal. One night, he tried to close the basement door, but it felt as though someone was holding it from the other side. He pulled with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew, and the door slammed shut on its own. The house now brought a new terror every night. Philip's behavior changed completely. He sometimes spoke in a strange language no one could understand. At times, his eyes turned completely black, as if something else had taken over. One night, he tried to attack his mother with a knife. Carmen managed to restrain him, but her heart trembled with fear. The other children had strange experiences too. Jennifer felt someone sitting on her bed at night. Brad heard crying from the basement. Melissa, the youngest, grew afraid to sleep. She said, "Mom, someone's watching us. I can feel their cold breath." Carmen and Alan called a priest from the church. The priest began prayers, but soon stopped, saying, "This place is filled with evil spirits. There are multiple entities here. I can't stay." He left that night, leaving the Snedekers alone. One night, Carmen saw something horrifying in the basement. In a corner stood an old coffin that hadn't been there before. Its lid was half open, and a shadow sat atop it. The shadow had no eyes, but its gaze was so intense that Carmen's entire body shook. She screamed for everyone, but by the time they arrived, it was gone. The Snedeker family was broken. They lived in constant fear. One night, as they huddled in their rooms, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the basement. Carmen and Alan gathered their courage and opened the basement door. Written on the walls in red was, "You shouldn't be here." Their blood froze. They woke the children and spent the night at a neighbor's house. At the first light of dawn, they left that horrific house forever. After the Snedekers fled, renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house. They confirmed that it was not only haunted by spirits, but also infested with demonic entities. These forces were so powerful that they controlled the spirits and harmed the living. The Warrens spent several nights in the house. They heard strange noises, felt cold winds, and experienced attacks. Lorraine, who could communicate with spirits, said the house held trapped souls seeking release. But the most dangerous was the entity controlling them. They recommended a large-scale exorcism, but the landlord refused, insisting the house needed to be rented out. The Snedeker house is no ordinary tale. It is a true story that shattered an entire family. The Snedekers left the house, but its memories stayed with them. Today, the house still stands in Southington, but no one stays long. They say the shadow of the funeral home doesn't end with death. It can creep into your dreams,